Hello, hi, and welcome to the Biokinetic K9. We are live here this awesome Friday afternoon. We are going to be talking about the real common ones, the common injuries that your dog can sustain just from doing normal obedience training, in particular obedience for competition, etc. And why I've chosen obedience training is because many people think it's a low-level activity. Nothing really. There's no major risk for asking your dog to sit, stand, go out, come back, and do a few obedience exercises, but you cannot be more wrong. Bob, hello, how are you? Thank you for joining. Awesome to have you here. So let's get cracking on that. But before I do, let me just introduce myself. My name is Angela Hearn. I'm the owner and founder of the Biokinetic K9, and I'm here to help with getting your dog in the best shape that they can be for the sport that you choose for your dog. My sport is IGP, love it, and my dogs love it too. So that's where those power sports and those protection sports, those are my hot sports. But for you and your dogs, whether you're doing just competitive obedience, agility, flyball, etc., we try and get your dog's body in the best condition that they can be in so that you can perform your sports with ease of mind and with a super awesome, well-defined, muscle-toned and fit dog that you can get the best out of the sport. So let's get on with regards to common injuries when it comes to obedience. So when we do obedience, we're not talking about, yes, we actually can be talking about normal companionship obedience. And why I say yes, we can. In our club, we had a new person start with just ordinary obedience training, not for competition, but just for companion dog. And he came through to the class, and the dog was a little bit off, a little bit listless, not really into what we were doing. And we said, I've got a fluff, guys, I've got a fluff here. I said, has anything happened with the dog? He says, no, nothing's really. He just seems a little bit off. He's not as energetic as he usually is. So what do? We take, instead of thinking, well, dog's just being lazy, come on, he must work now for us. I do a quick assessment, and what do I pick up? A muscle strain. So the dog has got a slight muscle injury, but he's quite young. It's not a major injury, and it's just noticeable. So we do some really easy things for him. I tell the owner, this is what's going on. Go have it confirmed and give him some rest, and then come back when we'll do some extra obedience with the dog when he's better and he can actually physically do it without feeling discomfort within himself. So regardless of your level of obedience training with your dog, these things can happen. And it happened at home, running around the backyard. Nonetheless, so what are the most common injuries that your dog can get from just doing normal obedience? We're going to protection work where there's a lot more demands on the dog's body, or agility, also a lot more demands, flyball, all of those things. We're just talking about simple obedience. And what we can see is that when it comes to competitive obedience, we're asking the dog's body to be like at attention and to be taut, and muscle tone must be right there. The dog must be in a state of attention with his body. The body mustn't be laxed when we're doing obedience. So the dog must be what they call in drive, that alertness, but it must show in the muscles as well of the body. Then you know your dog's obedience, competition obedience is going to be really well, because the dog's in control of his body. But one of the main issues with that alertness in muscle tone is that it causes, because we're doing obedience in a specific way, it causes the dog's body to create muscle imbalances. And when we talk about muscle imbalances with obedience, really, Angela, really, yes, muscle imbalance, especially when it comes to competitive obedience. In competitive obedience, a dog always has to look up towards its right. The dog is on the left to you and is looking up to you towards the dog's right and on your left-hand side. But if you had to walk like this all day, you would have across the spine muscle tension from this side in the neck to that side on the spine. And these things happen with the dogs as well. And because you are working on this particular movement and this style of walking with your dog, which is not natural, easygoing style of walking for the dog. But you're asking them to train like this all the time. So it's a training, and you're training the dog to walk in an imbalanced fashion. You are causing a muscle imbalance. Muscle imbalances cause the muscles on certain areas of the dog to become really, really strong, and on other areas of the dog to become overstretched or overflexed and weaker. And this is what happens just with normal obedience training, normal heel work. We're not even asking for a jump of any kind, just heel work. It's causing a muscle imbalance. And because of the demand of the sport. So the demand of the sport, the rules of the sport is that the dog must look up attentively at the handler. And in order to do this, we want to show that the dog is looking up and being attentive to us. And for that, we're asking them to lift their head up to the right. And so they're walking like this all the time. If you have to walk like this all the time, you are going to get a crick in your neck. It's going to go down your spine. You'll even feel it in your legs and your knees. Same things happen with the dog. So muscle imbalances, if the muscles are really tight, if you've got tight muscles in various parts of your body, tight muscles can even pull the skeleton out of sync. You've seen it with sports players. If they've got a pulled muscle, it can sometimes it can malalign the spine, and then you have to go for chiropractic. I know many people send their dogs to the chiropractor to realign the spine and the skeletal structure of the dog. But those chiropractic adjustments are short-lived if there is a muscle spasm. So you have to look at muscle strains, muscle spasms, and release those muscles for the skeleton to remain aligned. Otherwise, you're just doing adjustments all the time. And continued adjustments should alert you, especially if it's in the same areas all the time, should alert you to muscle strains. And these things happen in obedience due to this muscle imbalance. So muscle imbalances, like I said, it can cause the skeleton to even be pulled out of alignment. But signs of muscle imbalances will be changes in the size and the bulk size of the muscles on different parts of the body. So they should be even. And sometimes an imbalance is that they are not even left and right, front to back. There will be decreased flexibility in the dog. So always check if your dog is flexible equally on both sides of the body. A decreased in flexibility on one side shows there's a muscle imbalance of some sort. So a muscle could either be overly long, overly stretched and weaker, or it could be really flexed and tight. Muscle imbalances also cause pain, and that will hamper your dog's performance in your obedience competition. So when we're talking about obedience competition, we're talking about normal FCI obedience, kennel union obedience competitions, but we're also talking about the obedience portion in IGP or the obedience portion in PSA. All your obedience sections of a sport come under this banner of obedience training. So if a muscle is imbalanced, it can cause pain because there is offloading of limbs, for example, and compensations that happen around the body that the dog has to take into consideration when he's walking next to you, when he has to sit, and now those muscles are of different sizes, and he has to tuck his back legs under his body, or if he has to lie down, pull away from a lie down on a recall to collect a dumbbell, all of those things. If the muscles are imbalanced and there are compensations throughout the body, there's also pain in the dog, and it will show in his sport. The next thing you have to look for, and this is, it's not something that we will commonly say, because this normally happens to a really overly zealous dog. But when it comes to obedience, cruciate injuries also occur. It's quite common. So a really bad cruciate, what is a cruciate ligament? A cruciate ligament injury. So you're looking at the knees of the dog, the back legs, you're looking at the knees. And your cruciate ligaments, if this is your knee, the cruciate ligaments are the cross ligaments on the top and bottom bones in the knee. And these ligaments, they hold the knee stable when the dog moves to the side with the back legs. When it comes to obedience, because the head is up, the back legs are not in easy alignment. So there's always a slight pressure on the one side of the knee when it comes to obedience, because the dog is looking up towards the side. And when we are asking the dog to do really sharp turns for a retrieve, so they're going out, collect the dumbbell, turn really sharply and come back. If they have to do really quick stops, really fast pull-aways, there's a lot of tension on those ligaments to keep the knee aligned with the top and bottom bones of the hind leg. So if a cruciate ligament tears, one of those cross sections tears, then that whole knee area is now suddenly unstable. And if it's a really bad injury, it can stop a dog's career quite easily. So you always want to try and avoid that. But a cruciate ligament, those tears usually come on because of an lingering underlying something that's happening with the dog, which could be from a muscle compensation or a muscle imbalance, as we discussed a little bit earlier. If there's muscle imbalances, especially in the top thighs or the gluteal muscles of the dog, then one leg is stronger than the other, and the weak leg is taking a lot of strain from this overly strong leg on the other side. So your cruciate ligament injuries, normally they tear because there's an underlying something that's happening somewhere with the dog. So cruciate ligaments, they normally tear, especially in obedience, if the dog is having to walk and run and stop, and suddenly that floor, the ground that they're on, there's morning dew in a competition, because you are on maybe first, so there's a lot of morning dew and the ground is slippery, or you're in an indoor arena and the surface is slippery. Or what's happened, you practicing obedience and you reward to the side with the ball, the dog suddenly turns and the grass roots are a little bit longer and the foot gets stuck and the dog turns, tearing its cruciate. All these things, they happen easily and quickly. So when it comes to just working for obedience with your dog, you can easily get your cruciate injuries through normal wear and tear of the knees of the dog. There's lots of we do a lot of turns, so these things happen many times with your agility dogs, so they're turning quite hard, but easily happen with your obedience dogs if you're doing lots of retrieves, lots of recalls, and the dogs have to turn really hard. If the dog is slightly overweight, is too heavy for what it's for its own good, and you're asking the body to do a lot of quick bursts of movement and changes of direction, you're looking at genetics. Sometimes there's a genetic component to a weaker ligament or laxed ligaments that affect the hips, knees, and all the joints in the body. And so there's extra tension and extra torque on those joints, which can easily tear a ligament. You're also looking at, we've spoken about this before, your weekend warrior syndrome. So the dog's been lounging around all week. You feel bad, so you go for a hike. The dog's out doing all the work and the muscles around the joint do not have the strength and tone to keep those joints nicely secure. So a lot of the dog's turns rely on the strength of the ligaments. And if those ligaments are not strengthened with fitness training and conditioning through strength training, then those ligaments easily tear. So the fitness level of your dog really determines or really affects the strength and health of ligaments, tendons, muscles, and in the end joints of a dog. So really important that you keep those joint structures and stabilize the muscles and big muscles strong to protect the joints of a dog. Then we're also looking at, it sort of follows on, but repetitive strain injuries. So yes, it can be around the joint, but these affect muscles. And what we're talking about here is the overuse of a muscle. So if you're practicing a lot of sit to stands, if you're practicing a lot of recalls from a down, so that from a down, that's easy down, and suddenly the dog has to burst into a really fast recall, you can easily cause a repetitive strain injury on a muscle, slight muscle tears, all of these things, changes of direction. If it's not going to affect the ligament, it can affect the muscle. And a repetitive strain injury is normally the result of a gradual build-up in the damage of the muscles or the tendons and the nerves within those muscles. And because you're repeating the activity all the time, and so now you're repeating the activity all the time with an imbalanced muscle, then you're putting extra strain on certain areas of the body, and that repetitive strain causes an injury. There's a build-up of small micro injuries, and eventually it's a problem, the dog can't work. So strain injuries really happen when the dog is tired So I've seen people where they're training, especially for obedience, and they're training the dogs tired, and you see it in the muscle tone of the dog. So a tired muscle is just that dog's muscle's inability to hold a contraction. If a muscle is tired, it cannot hold a contraction. And muscles contract in order to steer, direct, and change speed of a dog. So when the muscle cannot hold a contraction and the dog's running, and suddenly you ask the dog to stop, lie down, like in the long send away in IGP, the dog is supposed to run out at full speed, stop and lie down. Now you're asking the dog's muscles to contract really hard because they're running fast and to then lie down. But if a dog's muscles are tired, that contracting ability of the muscle is now less. And so the dog's body hasn't got the proper braking power that it should have. And so you can get a muscle strain, a small tear in the muscle structures of the body. So muscle strains easily happen when the dog's muscles are tired. So when you see and you're working your obedience with your dog, as soon as that muscle tone is not there when you ask the dog to heel, and the dog's body is not able to engage in that heel, then you know there's tiredness, fatigue has set into that body. Rest the dog. Overtraining is a major cause of muscle fatigue. And then that lack of days of rest, that recovery period for tired muscles doesn't happen, is also a huge problem for repetitive strain injuries. Because that resting period, if you've been working your dog really hard, that resting period is so important for the muscles to repair. When a muscle repairs from being worked really hard, the repair work in the body ensures that the muscle is repaired in a stronger manner than what it was. That's how muscles grow. So repair work always tries to ensure that whatever was damaged is repaired stronger. But you have to give the body chance to actually build the repair. And that lack of repair will then also cause those repetitive strain injuries, because you cause micro strains, layer upon layer, until the muscle eventually gives in. So overtraining and missed rest days will definitely cause repetitive strain injuries. It's always important to balance your training and the intensity of the training that you're doing in that session with the appropriate rest afterwards. Actually, when it comes to obedience, I know of a really powerful Rottweiler. He had all of these things. He had muscle imbalances from the obedience. They were practicing the obedience, and during that obedience practice, he tore cruciate. And during his obedience training as well, he also injured another muscle, which we're going to be speaking about afterwards. So of the 5 most common injuries that we're talking about here, this dog had 3 just doing obedience work, and he was a powerful Rottweiler. So the next thing that you have to look for in obedience work is tight spines. And so strangely enough, this is quite prevalent in dogs that do carting, of all things. If one of your competitions is to have your dog pull carts and enter competition with carting, a lot of people go, oh, what a useless sport. But the dog's body has to be really physically fit. And if you're thinking of a cart, it normally has those sidebars that come either side of the spine. And the dog hasn't got full flexion movement of the side to maneuver that cart. And so his muscles along his spine become really tense and tight. So always, for those guys out there that are doing carting, please make sure that you massage those spinal muscles because they become tight. But tight muscles also happens in obedience. And if you think about for obedience, you're asking them to be at attention. So they have to be really, their muscles have to be really toned down the spine, and they're looking up. It causes that imbalance of muscle tightness on either side of the spine. But the thing that you have to remember is when it comes to having tight muscles and muscles in your back, if my muscles are spasming in my back next to my spine, I'm really miserable and it's really sore and you can't really do much. The same thing happens with a dog. If they've got a tight spine, they're not in the best frame of mind to work. And it comes out in their obedience, especially if you're competing now. A sore spine, muscles around the spine is not nice to walk around to attention with. So a tight spine will cause an altered gait. So their natural free flow, the natural gait of the dog, if the muscles are tight in the spine, their gait will change, and this will cause further muscle imbalance as well. So they'll have an altered gait, and of course, their ability to turn sharply will definitely be affected. So their pivots, their retrieves to come back to you tightly, the ability to turn around, it'll all be affected if their muscles are tight along the spine. And of course, it will definitely affect their ability to jump in order to do retrieve. So any jump work in an obedience competition, you will definitely see it will not be as it is supposed to be for your dog if their muscles along their spine is tight. Nobody enjoys a tight pulled muscle along the spine, human or dog. And of course, point number 5, this is a really common one. It's really difficult to diagnose, and not many people see it in their dogs, but those iliopsoas strains. And the iliopsoas is a muscle that runs on the inside of the dog, underneath the spine, all the way into the pelvis, hips, the iliacs, the pelvic bones. And this is a huge muscle, and it does a lot. It's known as a hip flexor. So the iliopsoas is the muscle that enables your dog to lift up his hind legs, or for male dogs to lift up and tip to the side if they need to go for a wee, a toilet. So it is a hip flexor muscle. So all those things to bring the back legs to the front is the contraction of the iliopsoas muscle, a major function of theirs, and it is a really big muscle. So they use this muscle for loads of activities, for running, for especially jumping, that ability to tuck their legs underneath as they're coming into land, and also to stretch the legs out as they're going over the arc of the jump. The iliopsoas muscle is being engaged. When that muscle is aggravated, niggled, or sore, then you'll find that their jumps are affected. They can't stretch their legs all the way out. Their top line will be a little bit rote. It'll be because the muscle underneath their spine is tight and pulled, and so they'll keep their spine slightly curved to take the tension off that muscle. So their top line will not be as nice and flat as what it's supposed to be. There will be a shortened stride, so their back leg will not be able to elongate as far back as what they usually do. And there will be a lot of offloading, but it will be slight. It will be almost like the dog there's a little bit of bunny hopping in his stride, especially if they're running. There'll be a bunny hop in the back legs, and there'll be intermittent limping that you can't pick up, and you don't know why, because there's nothing wrong with their legs. It's the muscle underneath in their belly, underneath the spine, and in their pelvis. So when that muscle is suddenly injured, an acute injury, when that happens, it's normally due to they've lost their footing and that back leg has slid out to the side, or they've overextended their back legs in a jump because the muscles are not strong enough to hold the back legs and stop it from overextending towards the back end. So, or if there's any a sharp change in direction and maybe the back legs slip out from underneath them, any sharp, hard turn affects those iliopsoas muscles. So when I was speaking about that Rottweiler, it had an iliopsoas strain, it had a cruciate ligament tear, and it had tight muscles along the spine and muscle imbalances. And those muscle imbalances, the tight muscles along the spine, eventually it had to have a cruciate ligament surgery, and it had to have a spinal surgery because those muscles had pulled the spine out and it caused a bit of herniation of the disc. And this is just from obedience work. So when it comes to obedience work, these are the main, most common injuries that you would have from a low-level activity like obedience. People consider low level, but you're going to look at, it's a small summary, you're going to have muscle imbalances that are common. Cruciate injuries are common, so that knee, Repetitive strain injuries are another common one. Tight muscles along the spine is another one. And a big one is an iliopsoas strain. So these are common injuries that you should watch out for just from obedience training. We're not even going into protection work. We're not even going into agility training. We're not even doing fly ball training. But these are the most common ones. These injuries affect all of those other sports all at the same time, but it even affects a low-level sport like obedience. So watch out for those things. And some people ask me like, oh, but how will you see it? Because even like an iliopsoas strain, you won't just pick up, but there's certain things that you can do to, if you see your dog is like, it's just slightly off, but you're not too sure. There's certain bone markings or landmarks, bony landmarks on the dog that you can check to see. There's certain ways, if the dog is sitting in a particular way, it's all of these little red flags that these injuries may be present. If you want to know a little bit more about how you can spot these injuries before they become a big deal, we have a workshop on it. It was really successful. People really loved it. But it's how you can spot these injuries. Our workshop is called, Body Checks for Injuries workshop. So if you go onto my website at thebiokinetick9.com, just click on the Body Checks for Injuries workshop, and you'll learn all about how to spot these more common injuries in your dogs when you are working them. So Sharon, hi, thank you so much. You're finding this really interesting. I'm so pleased. But these things are so important that you know these things when you go and train your dog, and you know how to pick them up before they become a really big issue. All of these injuries normally occur from a buildup of small niggles. Muscle balances, we can correct them through conditioning and realign the body through and have balanced muscles just through proper conditioning training. Cruciate injuries, these things happen because a lot of the stabilizer muscles around the knees and the muscles are not strong enough to hold those knees together. You can help prevent those cruciate ligaments from happening by having really good, strong muscles for the sports that you are doing. If you're looking at repetitive strain injuries happen because, yes, sure, there's wear and tear. But if those muscle imbalances are there, you're repeating that same exercise like you'd have to do in obedience. You're repeating it all the time with an imbalanced muscle, and that causes faster wear and tear and a repetitive strain injury in those muscles. Those tight spine muscles, the exact same thing. There's certain positions that you can put your dog in, and you will be able to tell, are those muscles a little bit tight? Where are the imbalances? And then get to work on them. Those iliopsoas strains, if you don't know about them, they will pass you, and you will keep on working your dog until it's a huge issue. And when a dog has got a big iliopsoas strain, you're talking about 1 year off working. No competing, no training for a year, but just rehab work. So you can really avoid all of those nasties if you know what to look for. And we help you find what to look for in our workshop. So I hope that these things have helped you. Sharon, I'm so pleased that you found this interesting. That's awesome. I'm hoping that you take this information, watch your dog when you're doing your obedience practice, and bear in mind that these things can occur if your dog is not in alignment and not in balance. If you're taking your dog to veterinary chiro, awesome. But if they have to readjust the same issues all the time, it's more than likely that there's a muscle imbalance, and investigate further and get that sorted out. All right, so have a very awesome weekend, guys. Happy training. We've got some cold weather this week. We've had really cold weather this weekend, so the weekend's going to be nice and cool for training. Dogs are going to be really energetic. Have a really good weekend, and I'm going to see you next week. Let me put up my information. If you want to know a little bit more about what we do, please go visit my website. We are at thebiokinetick9.com, or pop me an email, contact me whenever, and I'm happy to answer some questions about what we do and how we can help you. My email is fit@thebiokinetick9.com. Let me put up all my details, and we can go from there. And then I'm going to wish you a very awesome weekend. And I'm going to say cheers. Bye-bye, everybody.